Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is the congressional elections in the United States. I am watching those who have been attacking Israel, and I'm thinking out loud about how to defeat them. It is a fair statement to say that U.S. politics has become very divisive. There are very few issues upon which both sides of the aisle agree. There is, however, still one issue on which most of Congress is in almost unanimous agreement and support. Most and almost are, I know, caveats, important and necessary caveats, but nonetheless. And that one issue is Israel. There is little doubt in the minds of almost everyone on Capitol Hill that the special relationship between the United States and Israel is in the best interest of not only Israel, but also of the United States. It might sound hyperbolic, but one might even argue that a strong Israel is in the best interest of the safety of not only the United States, but also of the entire Western world. The same, I would also argue, is true for America. That is, a strong United States is in the best interest of the safety of the Western world. And yet, there are still those in Congress who reject this almost universally accepted axiom. How does one deal with such a politician? How does one deal with a public personality who cannot or will not see the obvious? Who cannot and will not accept the obvious? I have the answer, and it is very simple, very basic. The answer is run a competing candidate to oust them in the primary. Find a sympathetic, attractive candidate who is more in tune with the gravitas of accepting the importance of Israel. A candidate who can defeat the incumbent. That is exactly what is happening. Political action committees, or PACs as they're called, and powerful players, kingmakers, and fundraisers are organizing to oust those in Congress who boycotted the speech that was delivered by Israeli President Isaac Herzog recently to a joint House of Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate, together. Ousting an incumbent sounds easy. Identify the candidate, raise the money, promote the candidate, and voila. The biggest challenge is convincing voters to switch their loyalty from one party for one person to the other. PACs, like the pro-Israel PAC, AIPAC, and some other affiliates like them, have begun their work to oust those representatives who pose a great threat to world stability. A threat not only just to Israel, but a threat to something even mightier, a threat to world stability and safety. The most critical politician now holding office and withholding support for Israel is obvious. It is Ilhan Omar of the 5th District in Minnesota. Ever since assuming office, she has been rabidly anti-Israel, repeatedly spewing and tweeting atrocious, hateful untruths about Jews and about Israel, the Jewish state. Ilhan Omar won re-election in 2021 when challenged in the primaries by Don Samuels. The congresswoman squeaked by with a win of only 2,500 votes. At the time, AIPAC, which supported Samuels, donated a paltry $350,000 to his campaign. It is abundantly clear that AIPAC and other pro-Israel PACs could have and should have dumped significantly more money into his campaign. The damage that Ilhan Omar has done and continues to do to Israel, to the United States, and the world has been disastrous. That was a mistake by AIPAC and the others. Anyone watching her bid for re-election in 2021, and especially her popularity since being re-elected, can see that Ilhan Omar is extremely vulnerable. She can be beaten, and there are even murmurs that Don Samuels might try a second run at Omar. But according to reports, AIPAC is setting their sights on another possible candidate to rival Ilhan Omar. She is Minneapolis City Council member, and her name is Latricia Vitaw. She's a moderate Democrat. She's a black woman. She's very popular in the city council. Another proponent of vocal and nefarious anti-Israel sentiments, also up for re-election, is Jamal Bowman, a Democrat from New York's 16th District. Bowman represents the Bronx and the southern part of the Westchester counties, areas like Mount Vernon, New Rochelle, and Yonkers. He defeated Eliot Engel, a longtime friend of Israel, and a 16-term incumbent. Jamal Momin, like Ilhan Omar, is very vulnerable. Jamal Momin, like Ilhan Omar, is a member of the Squad. The most important weakness of these two candidates, a weakness that pro-Israel supporters should use as their strength, is that they are so very publicly affiliated with the Squad. And the Squad is a coalition of politicians which mainstream America views as reactionary and out of touch with American values and principles. Americans view the Squad as revolutionaries, not representatives. And that makes the candidates' issues and causes hard for voters to identify with. A second weakness is that both of these candidates voted against the House resolution that rejected Israel as a racist state. That vote was an overwhelming 212 in favor, 9 against, and 1 other. Consider it a congressional miracle. Congress declared that Israel is neither a racist nor an apartheid state. The naysayers were, in order, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York, Andre Carson of Indiana, Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts, Cori Bush of Missouri, Delia Ramirez of Illinois, Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, Jamal Bowman of New York, Rashida Tlaib of Minnesota, Susan Lee of Pennsylvania, and Betty McCollum of Minnesota voted present. So wrong. That's unbelievable. It's essential for all Americans to understand that the friendship between the United States and Israel is a bulwark in fighting the enemies of the United States. The mutual benefits of this unique, special relationship are enormous. Israel's role, not merely in the Middle East, but in the world, is irreplaceable. Technological and scientific and cultural contributions alone, from the computer flash drive to the microchip. Without Israel, our phones and our computers would not be the same. And without Waze, we would all be lost. Coming up next, Points of View. First up is a column from the Wall Street Journal published on August 2nd, 2023. The column is entitled Ben-Gurion on Judicial Reform, and it was written by William Galston. The column, in this column at least, the author describes how Israel's founder, Ben-Gurion, viewed the role of the Supreme Court in Israel, and even compares it to the United States Supreme Court. This is how Galston begins. Israel does not have a constitution in the way most Americans understand the term. Instead, it has a series of basic laws passed by Israel's legislature, the Knesset, with a simple majority of members present and voting. In the 1990s, after the Knesset passed 2 new basic laws to protect human rights, Israel's Supreme Court declared that these laws had constitutional status and could be used as the basis for striking down ordinary legislation. It may seem odd that Israel has no written constitution. With few exceptions, modern representative democracies have adopted such documents. And Israel's Declaration of Independence, issued on May 15, 1948, promised that Israel would ratify one by October 1st of that year. Now Galston quotes from a speech delivered by Ben-Gurion in 1949, just after the new state of Israel was created, in which Ben-Gurion discusses this very issue of judicial reform and what is the nature of the Supreme Court. Galston writes, while there is something to both these rationales, the most important explanation for the nation-state's failure to adopt a constitution is that Ben-Gurion, Israel's founding father and dominant political figure, did not want one. 2 years ago, Neil Rogashevsky, a scholar at Yeshiva University, found and translated the speech that Ben-Gurion delivered in 1949 to the Knesset committee responsible for drafting a constitution. Ben-Gurion began his speech by denying that conventional practice had relevance for the new state. Israel had arisen in special historical circumstances and would have a particular task that nearly no other nation had, he said. The only question was whether prevailing practices would be good or not for the state of Israel. He reviewed the reasons that led other countries to adopt constitutions, such as the need to delineate powers in the federal system or to draw the line against tyrannical power, and denied their relevance for the Israeli case. Ben-Gurion then went to the heart of the matter. Whether Israel needed a distinction between ordinary laws that can be enacted by simple majority and foundational laws that would be harder to adopt and change. His answer was a resounding no. Just as I'm against special privileges in politics, he declared, I'm against privileged laws. Even if he found himself in the minority, he would oppose supermajority requirements. Why would a minority restrict itself? After all, he continued, every minority fancies that it will one day be a majority. Ben-Gurion was attacking the United States Supreme Court also, and its aggressive political involvement in all kinds of politics of the day. And Galston writes, citing the Lochner era of the Supreme Court, opposition to progressive social legislation, Ben-Gurion directly attacked American-style judicial review as a standard for Israel. In a country such as ours, imagine for yourselves that the nation wants something and 7 people designated with the rank of judge cancel something that the nation wants. This, in our country, would lead to revolution. For the people would say, we will do what we want. Israel, Ben-Gurion argued, has chosen a parliamentary form of government in which the people's representatives make and implement laws. In such a system, he bluntly concluded, it's impossible to delegate authority to the court to decide whether laws are kosher or not kosher. As Ben-Gurion spoke to the Knesset committee, the new state was experiencing a wave of immigration from the Middle Eastern countries, which he noted was raising concerns among Israel's mainly European founding generation that would be overwhelmed by, quote, savages who had no regard for the law. To his enduring credit, he pushed back hard against these sentiments. He warned against efforts to use the law to entrench the beliefs of European Jews against the views of newcomers. Galston concludes this way, explaining that, quote, Israelis who have mobilized against Netanyahu's government's plan to restrict the power of judiciary do not share Ben-Gurion's confidence that unrestrained parliamentary majorities can always be trusted to observe democratic norms. In recent decades, attacks on the judiciary around the world have often opened the door to soft authoritarianism with a democratic face. Still, Ben-Gurion was right to emphasize the tensions that judicial review would create in a parliamentary democracy. And many Israelis who reject the current government's attack on the judiciary believe that the expansion of judicial power in the 1990s went too far. But the quest for a new balance is proving elusive, and the failure to find it could inflict enduring damage. This is a very cogent and very interesting and very timely column, very appropriate. Thank you very much, William Galston. Next up is a column by Itamar Marcus that was published in Yisrael Hayom, Israel Today, on August 7, 2023. It's entitled, What the PA Doesn't Want America to Know, subtitled, Anti-American and Anti-British Hate Speech was omitted from the translation of the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas's Cairo speech. Itamar Marcus and his organization, Palestinian Media Watch, or PMW, are irreplaceable tools in helping us understand the situation on the ground vis-a-vis Palestinian issues. In this column, Marcus gives dozens of examples of hate speech by Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas, hate speech that is directed at the United States and at Great Britain. Non-Arabic speakers never read this hate speech. It's edited out of the English version and the press coverage of Abbas's speeches. Here is just one example. Marcus begins, the Palestinian Authority often translates its chief Mahmoud Abbas's important speeches into English and publishes them on the website of its official news agency, Wafa. Abbas's speech last week in Cairo was also translated, but one striking theme was left out: the anti-American, anti-British hate speech. The parts of Abbas's speech to a meeting of Secretaries General of various Palestinian factions that were not publicized in English demonized the United States and Britain as colonialist states that illegally created Israel. Abbas condemned the Balfour Declaration, which recognized the right of the Jewish people to establish a state in their homeland, as a conspiracy to promise to one, the Jews, who has no right. Abbas, Western colonialism, and the US and Britain in particular conspire to use the ominous Balfour Promise, the Declaration, in 1917, in which one who has no ownership gave promise to one who has no right. And that was in El Hayat al-Jadida, July 31st of that year, 2023. This is actually frightening. For years, we said that Arafat says one thing in English and very different things in Arabic. Leadership may have changed, but the style remains the same. Abbas has, however, trumped Arafat on one important level. The media colludes with him, and the omissions from his speeches are taken out by his staff and the media. Thank you, Itamar Marcus, once again, and the PMW for bringing this to everyone's attention. Coming up, commentary through cartoons, where pictures tell the story. I want to show you 7 cartoons, memes, and headlines today. First up is a warning sign. The caption reads, "Revised School Zone." Instead of a picture of children running across the street, there is a picture of children playing on their phones. The caution sign reads, "Caution, children crossing street looking down at their phones." Unfortunately, this is so true. So many people, and not just children, are guilty of crossing streets and walking through parking lots while looking down at their phones and not looking around. It is extremely dangerous and a habit people should get out of doing. Next up is a headline and a cartoon meme. The headline reads, "Bud Light controversy cost parent company about $395 million in lost sales." Everyone's favorite Bart Simpson says, "I've lost $395 million. And his father responds with that sense of pride that only a father can have. He says, "You've lost $395 million so far."
Kids, you tried your best and you failed miserably. The lesson is, never try.
This next cartoon is also about Bud Light. It's a major topic for cartoonists, and it will continue to be. It can't be ignored. We're looking at a Bud Light board meeting, and the topic of the meeting is marketing strategy. The group is discussing equity, politics, sensitivity, diversity. The guy in the corner, at the corner seat, raises his hand and says, "Or we could just sell beer." They should have listened to him, to the guy in the corner, and none of this would have happened. This next headline is from The Atlantic. It reads, "An unsettling hint at how much fraud could exist in science. 2 experts on dishonesty are separately accused of tampering with data for the same research paper." This is true, not at all made up. Stunning. This next headline reads, "Workers are less productive and make more typos in the afternoon and especially on Fridays." Well, I would agree with that. And I would add that one hardly needs to be a scientist or have a mathematical study to confirm that thesis. This next meme is brilliant, and it tries to show how illogical our fears can be. It reads, "Every year sharks kill 10 people. Every year 100 people die from being stepped on by cows." And here's the pun. Cow Week, coming soon to Discovery Channel. Kermit the Frog is making an important observation. He says, "Just realized the last day of 2023 will be 123 more slowly, 12/31/23. He's absolutely right. Gotta love Kermit.
It's not easy being green.
And for those who appreciate puns and art, this is a real classic. Look at the Van Gogh. Though correctly pronounced, it is Van Gogh. The GH is pronounced as an F. In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. Britain has warned their citizens traveling to Sweden of possible terrorist attacks and outraged Muslims following the burning of Korans by anti-Islam activists there. In updated travel advice, Britain's Foreign Ministry said Swedish authorities had successfully disrupted some planned attacks and made arrests. The statement read, "You should be vigilant at this time. terrorists are very likely to try and carry out attacks in Sweden. Obviously, sites visited by foreigners are potential targets for terrorists. While Quran burnings are permitted in Sweden under free speech rules, Muslims view burning of their holy book as blasphemy. The United States government has also warned of possible terrorist attacks in Sweden in its travel advice to its citizens. Temperatures in Morocco have for the first time on record topped 50 degrees centigrade. That's 120 in Fahrenheit. That information was obtained courtesy of the North African country's meteorological service. The Moroccans are suffering through a scorching heat wave, as is the rest of the Middle East. According to the country's general director of meteorology, the southern coastal city of Agadir recorded the new national record of 50.4 degrees centigrade, 120 Fahrenheit. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu asked the ultra-Orthodox parties in Israel to compromise on a softened military conscription plan, a plan that was less than they were promised, out of fear that the reservist crisis in the military would also permeate to the regular units in the army. Netanyahu hoped that this new plan would not inflame protests against the judicial overhaul. The ultra-Orthodox parties, however, firmly refused the plan. They are insisting that the law exempting yeshiva students from military service be promoted immediately with the beginning of the winter session, as part of an outline that will be immune from judicial reform. An attack on a Shiite Muslim shrine in Iran's central city of Shiraz killed at least 4 people. State media, which reported the attack, add that 1 person had been arrested. No group immediately claimed responsibility for the attack on the Shah Karag shrine, which state news agency IRNA said had been carried out by terrorists. Tasnim, a semi-official news agency in Iran, reports that at least 7 people were wounded and shops in the area had been closed. State TV said that the shrine area had been cordoned off by security forces. Last October, the Islamic State, or ISIS, announced that it had launched an attack against the same shrine, an attack which killed 15 people at the time. The all-time record for electricity consumption in Israel was broken this past Sunday, at noon exactly, and stood at 15,690 megawatts, according to the Noga electricity system management company. The previous record was set on July 25th. According to Shaul Goldstein, the CEO of Noga, quote, "The demand records that have been broken several times this summer are the result of heavy heat and its persistence, as well as the result of economic growth in recent years," unquote. Israel has ruled out a diplomatic base in Jerusalem for the new Saudi envoy to the Palestinians. The new appointment comes as Washington tries to forge formal Israeli relations with Riyadh. The Saudi ambassador to Jordan, Naif al-Sadairi, expanded his credentials to include non-resident envoy to the Palestinians. A social media post by his embassy in Amman, Jordan, said Consul General in Jerusalem was now among al-Sadairi's duties. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu leveled criticism at Washington amid reports on emerging understandings between the United States and Iran. A statement released by the Office of the Prime Minister reads, and this is a quote here, "Israel's position is clear. Arrangements that do not dismantle Iran's nuclear infrastructure, do not stop its nuclear ambitions, and only provide funds that will reach Iran-backed terrorists, proxies." We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Did you know that David Ben-Gurion's last name was Green or Gruen? Green, that's what Gruen means. Ben-Gurion actually in Hebrew means son of a lion cub. It was the future first prime minister's desire to Hebraicize his name Gruen to Ben-Gurion. In the Talmud, there is also a character named Buni Ben-Gurion. This is where David Ben-Gurion probably took his name. In the tractate Ta'anit, starting on the folio page 19b, going on to the next folio page 20a, there's a story about how Ben-Gurion prays for rain in Jerusalem. At times, Ben-Gurion is also called Nakdimon or Nekmadmos. Here is the story from the Talmud. The sages taught, Tana Rabbanan, once upon a time, when all the Jewish people ascended to Jerusalem for pilgrimage festival, there was not enough water for them to drink. Nakdimon Ben-Gurion, one of the wealthy citizens of Jerusalem, went to a certain Gentile officer, a hegemon, and said to him, "Lend me 12 wells of water, or cisterns of water, for the pilgrims, and I will give you back 12 wells of water. And if I do not give them back to you, I will give you 12 talents of silver." And the officer said, he set a time limit for returning the water. When the set time arrived, no rain had fallen, and the cisterns were empty. In the morning, the official sent a message to Nakdimon. He said, "Send me the water or the coins that you owe me." And Nakdimon Ben-Gurion sent him a message, "I still have time, as the entire day is mine." At noontime, the official sent a message again and said, "Either the water or my coins, please." Nakdimon sent another message, "I still have time in the day." And in the afternoon, he sent another message, "Send me either the water or the coins that you owe me." Nakdimon sent another message, "I still have time in the day." The officer ridiculed him, saying, "Throughout the entire year, rain has not fallen, and now it will rain?" He entered the bathhouse, that is the officer, in a state of joy, anticipating a large sum of money he was about to receive. As the master entered the bathhouse in joy, Nakdimon entered the temple in a state of sadness. He wrapped himself in his talit, in his prayer shawl, and stood in prayer. He said to God, "Master of the universe, it is revealed and known before you that I did not act for my own honor, nor did I act in honor of my father's house. Rather, I acted for your honor, so that there should be water for the festival of pilgrims." Immediately the sky became overcast, and rain fell until the 12 cisterns were filled with water, and there was even more water, so that they overflowed. As the master left the bathhouse, Nakdimon Ben-Gurion left the temple. When they met one another, Nakdimon said to the master, to the officer, "Give me the money you owe me for the extra water you received when it rained." The official said to him, "I know that the Holy One, blessed be He, has shaken His world and caused the rain to fall only for you. However, I still maintain the claim against you, by which I can legally take my coins from you, as you did not pay me on the agreed date. For the sun had already set, and therefore the rain fell onto my property." Nakdimon went back and entered the temple, wrapped in his talit again, and stood in prayer. He said before God, "Master of the universe, let it be known that you have beloved ones in your world." Immediately the clouds gathered, and the sun shined. At that time, the officer said to him, "If the sun had not broken through the clouds, I would have had a claim against you, by which I could have taken my coins from you." And the Rebbe taught, Nakdimon was not really his name. Rather, it was the name of Buni. That was his name. And why was he called Nakdimon? Because the sun broke through, nikdara for him. It broke through the clouds. And the sages taught, with regard to the three people, the sun broke through and shone at an irregular time for the sake of Moses, Joshua, and Nakdimon Ben-Gurion. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.